you're going.
All right. Hey, it's Coach Stricker, and I'm here to talk to you today about titrations and teach you about the terms and everything that goes hand in hand with that. And first of all, it's important to understand that in titrations, we're going to use a burette, which is a tall glass tube. We're going to fill it full of base. And in this case, we're going to use 1.5 molar NaOH, which is sodium hydroxide. So we will have a known base molarity. Okay, so that's going to be my MB. Now, I'm going to fill it all the way up, the whole 50 milliliters, and it's going to be, at the 0 point, because burettes actually count down. So they go 0 and then 50's down here. So I have an unknown amount of base that I'm going to figure out. So this is actually what you're doing in the titration, is you're figuring out how much base does it take to neutralize my acid. Okay, and that point of neutralization is called the equivalence point. All right, and then the point in the lab, the physical point in the lab, you'll see where the point of the titration where it starts to turn pink, which is because of the phenolphthalein that's in the acid, is the end point. So the physical end of the titration is the end point, but the end point tells you that you've reached the equivalence point, which is when the concentration of acid is equal to the concentration of base. All right, so in my Erlenmeyer flask here, I've got 30 milliliters of an unknown concentration of acid, of HCl. So in here, I've got 30 milliliters of my unknown acid, and so and then I add phenolphthalein. Phenolphthalein will turn pink in a base. All right, it stays clear in an acid, so I'll have like 3 or 4 drops of phenolphthalein in there. Then I will turn my burette, and it will drop, drip, 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 drip. And then this will start to turn a little bit pink and then go away. Start to turn a little pink and then go away. And then pretty soon it'll be a really, really, really light shade of pink. Okay, if it's dark pink, you've gone too far. And that is my end point, when it's just that really light shade, that hue of pink. And then you can determine the equivalence point by using this formula here. And that is the molarity of my acid times the volume of my acid equals the molarity of my base times the volume of my base. Now, when you're reading the meniscus, I should have said this in the beginning, okay, you read it eye level and you read the bottom of the meniscus. So it looks kind of like a smiley face, but the bottom of the meniscus tells you how much liquid you have. So you don't determine it from here, you determine it from here, okay? Now, we're going to say in the titration, I put it in and I dripped it all the way down. I used 39.5 milliliters of my base. So my known molarity of my base is 1.5 molar. I got that from here. My volume of my base that I determined in my titration was 39.5 milliliters. Okay, I know that I started off with 30 milliliters of acid. And I do not know the concentration of my acid, so that's what I'm going to determine in the titration. So, this was the number that I found right here in the titration. That's what we got in the burette. So then I do the math. Remember, you got to get X on top by itself. It's on top, but it's not by itself. So I divide both sides by 30.0. And then my MA is going to equal 1.5 times 39.5 divided by 30, and your molarity is going to be 1.98 molar of HCl. So that is how you would do a titration, okay? And so now we're actually going to show it to you on the using the glassware. Okay, so we start off, and I've got 20, let's see, I would say 18 milliliters of hydrochloric acid, and we don't know the molarity, and I put that in my Erlenmeyer flask. I'm going to put 4 drops of phenolphthalein in here. That is my indicator. All right. Then I'm going to pour my base in the tube. So I have a good starting point. you don't always have to start at 0, so that's important to understand. Okay. And in this case, I'm starting at the bottom of meniscus is 4.7 milliliters. So 4.7 milliliters is my starting point. All right. So then I put my acid underneath here, and I start adding my base. You can see it's turning a little bit pink, but then it goes away. That's the phenolphthalein it's hitting. But then you'll see as the titration goes on, it'll stay pink a little bit longer. A little bit longer, and then it goes away. And as you get close to that end point, it'll stay pink longer. The longer it stays pink means you're close to the end point. It's pretty long right there, so almost done. A couple more drops here. You can see it's just staying a light hue of pink right there. And that stayed pretty long. So I would say that's pretty good. So it went down to 23.2. So 23.2 milliliters. So my final volume minus my initial volume. Okay, so 23.2 minus 4.7 is 18.5 milliliters. Okay, so 18.5 milliliters. And my base that I used, okay, was 1.7 molar NaOH. All right. Now the number I started with for my acid, do you remember that? Was it? It was, I believe it was 20.
Yes.
20 milliliters. Okay. And then my acid is unknown, so I don't know how much acid I had. All right. So I've got unknown acid. I had 20 mils of it. 1.7 molar NaOH is my concentration of base. It took 18.5 milliliters to reach the equivalence point, or the end point in the titration. So then I do the math, and it's 1.7 times 18.5 divided by 20 milliliters. And so my MA, you divide both sides by 20, my MA is 1.57 molar HCl. So it's actually really close to the base as far as the concentration goes. All right, so that's how you do a titration, and now you've seen it.